Hey guys, today I will be showing you how to use Presto in conjunction with Hive on a managed AWS Glue Hive metastore. And what that's going to allow you to do is run analytics on really big data that's stored in an S3 bucket. And the cool thing about Presto is that it's not really a database, it's kind of a query engine. And what I mean by that is it doesn't store data itself, it connects to other data systems like Postgres or Hive or lots of interesting data sources, even Mongo and document-oriented stuff like that. And probably the most useful case is to use Presto to take data from production data sources, like say a Postgres database, and ETL it into a Hive data warehouse, which then allows you to run analytical style queries that are frequent of business intelligence applications. You don't have to know what all of that means. Basically, what you have to know is Presto allows you to query very large amounts of data really fast, and it's free and open source. So let's get to it. I recommend you follow along by going to sqlref.com/tutorials/prestotutorial.html. That's my website, and this page is a companion page to this video. And once I finish recording the video, I will add it to the page. Okay, so step one, we need to create an EC2 instance. There are other ways of spinning up a Presto instance than, spinning up Ubuntu OS and installing everything yourself. But Presto is actually fragmented into two distinct camps. You have Presto DB and Presto SQL. Even if you Google Presto, you'll see prestodb.io, and then Presto SQL is right there. Those are actually two different organizations. You can choose which one you want to roll with. I prefer PrestoDB myself, but a lot of people prefer Presto SQL, and it might actually be the more mature branch at this point. But PrestoDB was the original project at Facebook. Okay, so let's spin up an EC2 instance. We're going to do Ubuntu x86. So create an AWS account if you haven't already. Go to EC2. Go to launch instance. You could choose any any Linux OS you want. I just like Ubuntu. And one thing to note about Presto is that it actually loads all the data that you're trying to query into RAM before running your processor. And that means that frequently RAM ends up being the bottleneck for queries. So the R5 instances have lots of RAM for the amount of CPUs that they have, so we're going to use an R5 large. In production, I prefer to use R5X large, but just for our purposes now, I'm going to go with R5 large. Okay, configure instance details, and let's see what we're doing here. We're going to have to create a new IAM role. And I know it's somewhere in here. There it is, create new IAM role. That's going to open up a new page. We're going to create a role, and there's two tiers of what we're doing here. We're going to create a role and add policies to that role. So what you do is you add a role to an AWS asset, like an EC2 instance, and that role has policies attached to it, and the policies are what specify which other services that particular asset can access. And in our case, we want to have this EC2 instance be able to access AWS Glue for that managed Hive metastore. And we also want it to be able to access S3 to be able to create tables, update data, and query that data. So we're going to create a role, common use cases, EC2. And we're just going to search for S3 and add Amazon S3 full access, and then search Glue and AWS Glue service role. So we're going to add those two policies to the role. Don't need any tags, and you can call this whatever you want. I'm going to call it my Presto role. Oh, I already made that, so I'm going to call it my Presto role 2. You can call this whatever you want. doesn't really matter. Create that role. And once that's created, you can X out of this and hit this refresh button. And my Presto role 2 should be there, or whatever you called it. You can see the old one that I made as I was doing a practice run. And let's see, was there anything else in here? Nope. Okay, next we're going to add storage. 8 gigabytes is kind of small for a hard drive, so I'm just going to bump it up to 50 just to make sure you don't run out. Don't need to add any tags. Don't need to configure any security groups. Review and launch. And we should be good to go. Okay, so I have existing key pairs, but I'm going to show you guys how to create and download a key pair just so we don't lose anybody. So create a new key pair, and this key pair is what you're going to use to access the EC2 instance that we're spinning up right now. So call it my key pair 5. You can name it whatever you want, just remember what you call it, download that key pair, and launch the instances. Okay, while that's coming up, let's take care of our key pair. So we're going to get the SSH key we downloaded into the .ssh directory. And if you don't know what SSH key is, just read this and it'll give you a little bit of context. And if you still want to learn more, I would encourage you to Google what an SSH key is and how to use it. Okay, so we're going to go to our downloads folder. Then we're going to move my key pair 5.pem to my SSH directory. Just like that. We're going to go back to home and go into the SSH directory. And then we need to change the permissions on the file, because the whole point of an SSH key is you're proving to the remote server you are who you say you are. And so you don't want anyone on your computer to be able to access that key. So we're going to do chmod 400 my key pair 5. Cool. And I think that was all the directions. Yep. So now we can SSH in. We just have to get the IP address. Okay. So find the instance that you just spun up. Find the public IP address, and then you're going to do SSH-I. You're going to need to give it the key pair that you were just using. And then Ubuntu is your username on any new Ubuntu box and the IP address. Yes. Okay, we are now in the computer that we just spun up on AWS. So let's see what's next. We need to install Presto dependencies. So Presto needs Python and Java, so we're just going to use Ubuntu's built-in package manager to install those. Okay. And everything is lightning fast because we're in the cloud. And this is actually what you use to install Java. JRE is Java Runtime Environment. All right, now we have our machine provisioned and we have dependencies installed, so it's time to actually download Presto and install it. So here is a command that you can just copy and paste if you don't care about having the absolute latest version of Presto. If you do care about that, you can go to this link, go to the Presto download page, and just copy this link right here and replace this link with the link that you copied. But as of right now, this is the latest version, so I'm going to copy that. And curl is the command you use to download stuff on Linux. And then we need to unpack that file that we just downloaded. And while that's installing, let's start talking about configuring Presto. So there's 3 main files that you need to get Presto working. And those 3 files are config.properties, jvm.config, and node.properties. The config.properties allows you to set properties that control how a cluster of Presto nodes behaves. We're only using a single node cluster at this point, so some of them are kind of irrelevant. But when you start scaling your cluster out to meet higher demand or run queries on bigger data, that file becomes very important. JVM config, going to be straight up with you here. I have no idea what this file really does, but what I do know, one of my senior engineers told me, is you need to be careful about this one, -xmx. This is something that sets how much RAM the JVM, the Java Virtual Machine, has to work with. And something that I had to fight through myself was getting that number right. You need to give it enough room to be able to load data into RAM and run all the processing that it has to do, but you also need to leave enough RAM for your operating system, Ubuntu, to be able to operate. So if you're finding that you're seeing error logs having to do with the amount of RAM, try playing around with this variable here, and then go cry to your senior engineer when you can't figure it out. Node.properties, that's stuff that sets variables relevant to the specific node that you're currently working on. So config.properties is for the cluster. Node.properties is for the single computer. And one other thing we need, because we're going to be hooking up Presto to Hive, we need to configure a hive.properties file. You need to configure a file for each data source that you want to connect to. So for example, if you wanted to query a Postgres database with Presto, which is possible and also very cool, you would need Postgres.properties or whatever you wanted to call it. So let's get into it. Also, everything I just said is in the Presto docs. In the deploying Presto, they do a better job giving more detail about what each of these files actually does and the options that are available to you to change those. Okay, so let's actually start by doing the Presto config.properties file. So the first thing we need to do is put them in the right place. So we're going to go into the directory that we just created by unzipping stuff. And then we need to create a directory called etc. We're going to go into etc. And Presto just expects to find these files in this directory. Then we need to create those files, so vi config.properties. If you don't know what vi is, it's a text editor called Vim. And it's a little bit different than what you're used to. There isn't much mouse support, but it's the de facto way of writing config files on Linux boxes in the cloud. So press I to go into insert mode, copy what you got here, and then to save it, you press escape to exit insert mode, :WQ for write quit. Okay, let's do the same for jvm.config. Insert. And then we'll do it one more time for node.properties. And one more time, we're going to need to create one more file, but it needs to go in a directory called catalog. So in that etc directory, make a folder called catalog, go into that folder, and create a file called hive.properties. And one interesting thing to note here is hive.metastore is equal to glue. And Presto has built-in support for the AWS Glue service. That's how common of a use case it is to use Glue to drive a Hive data warehouse that is being accessed with Presto. And it's definitely the way that I recommend doing things. If you want, you can create a Hadoop file system cluster and run Hive Metastore yourself with an external database, but that's just a lot of work that you don't need to do because Glue works great. Okay, WQ again. And at this point, we can run Presto. So we can go back a couple directories, And instead of going into Etsy, which is where all the config files that we just made are, we can go into bin, which is where the binary files are that actually run Presto itself. And we're going to start screen, which is Linux's tab manager. If you don't know what screen is, go to this link right here to learn about it. It's basically a way to have multiple tabs running in Linux. Okay, so we're in screen and we're in bin. So we're going to do sudo /launcher start. And that is the thing that's going to actually start Presto for us. Cool. And then we're going to go to this directory to see the logs just to make sure that Presto is running. So go there. You can create a new screen to go here or not, your choice. And do tail 1000. That's just showing the end of the file. Server.log. And you can see the end of the file, the log file, is server started with no errors. And that's what we want to see. So Presto is running. Cool. And Control-C gets you out of the tail log file. Okay, so we have Presto server running, but we're not quite done yet. Now we need to install the Presto CLI, which is the thing that allows us to actually run SQL commands against this Presto server. You can install it anywhere. You could even install it on your laptop and send your SQL queries to the remote server for processing. But to do that, we would have had to open up networking ports and changed firewall rules. Let's not do that. Let's just install Presto CLI right on this Ubuntu box that we have. So we're going to, I guess we don't really need to create a new tab here either. We're going to install it in our home directory because it doesn't matter where we install it. To get there, just type cd and then get the Presto CLI download link from the Presto download page, or just copy and paste what I have here. Oh, looks like I have a little typo there. I'll fix that before publishing the video. When you're copying this, make sure that you don't copy that little backtick right there. Okay, and that is going to download the Presto CLI to a file called Presto. And then we need to change the permissions of that file with chmod +x to add the ability to execute it. Presto. Sorry, that should be a +x too. So a couple of mistakes here that I'll have to fix. Make sure it's +x, not -x. Okay, now we're going to run the Presto CLI. So we're going to say /presto -- server localhost because the Presto server is running locally. 8080 is the default Presto port. And here we are. We're going to have to create an S3 bucket because remember, the whole point of this is we want to use the Hive data warehouse queried by Presto to manage our data, and Hive likes to put that data in S3. So we'll create an S3 bucket, go to Services, S3, create bucket. You can call it whatever you want. I'm going to say Cal's bucket. Actually, I don't think I can have underscores. Cal's bucket 29. And none of this really matters. Create bucket. Cool. We did that. And now we can create a schema and a table inside of that schema. So let's create our schema. And to create it in the right place, say Cal's bucket 29 or whatever you called it. Hive. Oh, my schema already exists. I've done this, I've practiced this tutorial before, and I just already had a schema named my schema. That's why I got this error. So I'll just try creating it as something else. My schema 2. Why not? Great. And then we're going to create a table inside that schema. Can I get up there to edit? No, I can't. Okay, let's just create a simple table. That doesn't need to be big int. Okay, so that created a table, and now we can insert some data. So we could say insert into hive.mySchema2.myTable values, and this is just a simple SQL statement, as you can see. And you saw a little message flash up while it was working. And if we go to the S3 Management Console, refresh, the name of the bucket I created was calsbucket29 with dashes. If you go in there, you'll see that there's actually an object called myTable. And that was created by Hive, which is running in AWS Glue. And that's exactly what we wanted to do. So the possibilities here are really cool, where you could run queries on, say, a Postgres relational database, join that data with, say, a MongoDB database at the same time in the same query, and then dump all that data into an S3 bucket to then be able to run analytics on it. And Presto, while it's not the absolute fastest thing out there, it's probably not quite as fast as BigQuery or Snowflake or some of the other big proprietary data warehouses, it is very fast, especially if you store the data in what's known as an ORC format. If you don't know what ORC format is, or what column-oriented storage is, it's just a way of writing the data in a vertical way as opposed to horizontally on the disk. And that can be a little bit of a tricky concept, so I would just encourage you, if you don't know what that is, to just search column storage versus, say, row storage. And there should be lots of things about why Presto and these other data warehouse kind of products are so fast. Okay, so, oh yeah, let's run one quick query just to show it actually running. So select star from hive.myschema2.myTable, and it should return our row. There it is. Cool. So that was it. I hope this was useful to you. Please reach out to me if you find any errors that I didn't just catch, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.